enthusiasm and energy, doing a fantastic job for Spring Week. But the entire team has really stepped up to bring this to a new level. So things are going great in San Francisco. We, of course, are embracing as tightly as we can and loving it, quite frankly. The University of California College of the Law of San Francisco. We are um, working on all the details that are necessary to get the name change in place. We continue to have our email addresses, but that will be changing over the semester. The web page has already undergone a bit of a transformation, but that will continue over the summer. And so we're really at I think, a point of transformation for the school. I'm not sure it's quite as great as what David Snodgrass did in coming up with the 65 Club, which without any question put our great school on the map. And I know many of you have great memories of that, as do I. It started back in 1987 and just had wonderful colleagues. And I've had wonderful colleagues throughout my time here at UC Law. We are not only building buildings, which I'll come back to, but we're really expanding what we do as an educational institution. And the buildings are part of that, and the partnerships are part of that. But the core of our mission really is to be a great law school. I want us to be, as I found it when I started in 1987, and I think we are very much one of the preeminent law schools in the country. We are fortunate to be where we are in San Francisco. I continue to think, even though San Francisco gets a few knocks here and there, and we have challenges still recovering from COVID, I look outside, it's beautiful blue sky, it's 60 degrees. I can't imagine wanting to live anywhere else on the planet. So we're just so fortunate to be here and have this to be our home. And not everybody comes to San Francisco and stays, which is certainly fine too. I, in fact, often tell our students, go elsewhere, go out and go to Hawaii, work for the Hawaii Supreme Court. We have graduates on that court. Go to Los Angeles, San Diego, Portland, Seattle, Washington, D.C., New York, Dallas, Houston, Chicago, Atlanta. There is just great work being done in the practice of law throughout the country, and they're getting a great foundation for doing that, I think, here at UC Law San Francisco. But having San Francisco as our home and being one block from City Hall gives us opportunities that are really not matched by almost any other law school in the country. I mean, there are a few in maybe DC, a few in New York, but we have the California Supreme Court literally a stone's throw from our sky deck, and I do encourage our students not to throw stones at the California Supreme Court. We have a federal building immediately to the north. We have a federal building immediately to the south. We have the Ninth Circuit just 2 blocks away. So every local, state, federal agency and court is literally within a block or two of our campus. And that provides externship opportunities that really are unmatched in other places. But we also have the tech and business community that surrounds us. And although, again, the tech sector is going through some changes and through some challenges, I think that's temporary. It has been temporary in the past. I remember back in the bubble times, the late 90s and early 2000s, everybody was writing off Silicon Valley and everybody was writing off San Francisco. And then, of course, everything exploded throughout the first 2 decades of this century. Similarly now, you look around and there are layoffs at Meta and Google and Microsoft and so forth. But again, you also look around and you see ChatGPT 4.0 and everybody working on generative AI, which is going to absolutely revolutionize not only the practice of law, which we are also preparing to meet, but it's going to revolutionize business, it's going to revolutionize tech, it's going to revolutionize our entire world. And what the world is going to look like as robotics and generative AI start coming together is just hard to imagine and inconceivable. But if it is, and when it is conceivable, it'll be conceived here in San Francisco and in Silicon Valley. We're just always going to be at the tip of that particular sphere. And we're going to take advantage of that. We created the externship program for in-house counsel, which is incredibly popular. We have the startup Legal Garage, which also is very popular with our students working with local attorneys to represent early startup companies. We have an incredible array. I always like to say, and I'm very proud of the fact that we're one of the largest law schools in the country. But that gives us a great opportunity. I think we're one of the top 5 in terms of size of law schools. But that gives us a very broad and deep curriculum. But it also gives us centers. And I like to say we're a big tent. I know that's kind of an old-fashioned phrase, but I'm old-fashioned, so I embrace that. And we have U.S. attorneys that are Trump appointees, and we have U.S. attorneys that are Biden appointees. We have judges on every side of the aisle. We have legislators on every side of the aisle. We have lawyers who practice for the Sierra Club. We have lawyers who practice for Chevron and Exxon. We are in the business of creating great lawyers and great advocates, and that's what we ought to be doing in-house. And our centers, I think, represent that quite nicely. We have the Center for Racial and Economic Justice, and we have the Business Law Center. We have the Indigenous Law Center, and we have the Tax Law Center. We have the Center for Gender and Refugee Studies. We have the UCSF UC Law Consortium on law science and health policy. And so if you're a prospective student, and I know we have all of our alumni here, but as we think about the future, we're really thinking about what kind of education we're offering the students that are coming to our campus. And what we want to offer is a foundation from which they can do anything they want in their careers. And that means how they start their career and ensure that they pass the bar exam and give them every opportunity to empower them to deal with the bar exam. And the bar exam itself is changing, that we have to deal with. The National Conference of Bar Examiners has announced that they will be changing the content of the bar exam. And the California Blue Ribbon Commission has announced that they're also adapting to a new reality where there'll be less memorization on the bar exam and more practical skills testing on the bar. And many of you, when you took the bar, had that practicum-oriented afternoon. Much more of the bar is going to be like that, which is much more like being a lawyer. You're given lots of materials and you're asked to write a memorandum or a draft of a brief or whatever it might be. So we're really in the business of paying attention to what you all do for a living, which is understanding what the actual practice of law is and how we can best advantage our students to be prepared for those realities, not only of today, but with generative AI, what the world's going to look like tomorrow. And of course, it's challenges for us. How do you give a paper assignment or a memo assignment or a open book exam when you can ask a computer to provide an answer and the computer does it in about 45 seconds. In fact, I actually have signed up for ChatGPT so I can see just how powerful it is. And I gave it one of my old exam questions regarding Citizens United, and it wrote a 7-paragraph, perfectly formed essay that probably would have gotten a B or B plus at the time. That was actually 3.5, so 4.0 is probably more powerful. And that was only a first draft, and it literally took 30 seconds for it to write those 7 paragraphs. So this is just going to change the world, and we better have attorneys that are prepared for that new world. And we better have an educational foundation for our students that really empowers them to deal with that world. On top of that, as you know, we are building out our campus. Many of you were on our campus when we had one building at 198 McAllister. You had as many as 500 to 525 students in a class. You had 1,500 plus students in that one building. We are moving to having 5 buildings and a class of about 400, so about 1,200 students altogether. So we're expanding our space, and what the space will permit us to do is really develop these partnerships with great institutions, not only in our locale, but also institutions across California and possibly across the United States. So, of course, UCSF is a foundational partner for the academic village. UC Davis runs a graduate program in business analytics on our campus. We are talking to business school to possibly have a business school join us on our academic village. And it'll really be a university-like experience to be on our campus. When the new building opens at 198 this summer, it'll be open for business at the beginning of August for the new class coming in and students who are still continuing students. We'll have 656 units of housing in that building. 1/3 of that is a master tenancy with UCSF. So we'll have medical students, we'll have pharmacy students, dental students, nursing students, as well as graduate students in the life sciences on our campus. The UCSF shuttle will stop at Hyde and McAllister, and our students will have access to that to get around the city. And then with the Davis Graduate School of Management, possible major business school, and other folks that will be staying there, we have deals with San Francisco State, University of San Francisco, University of Pacific Dental School, and Berkeley graduate programs to advertise what we call the Academe at 198. So those 656 units are going to be occupied by a broad array of students, graduate students, doing a wide variety of graduate programs. So it'll be opportunity for great organic growth in terms of intellectual ideas, and also potentially a great opportunity for our young students to meet a doctor or a doctor to meet a lawyer, and who knows what will come from that. But in the future, I'd like to have some children of these relationships so that they give back to the school that put them together in the first place. So where we are in terms of the buildings, of course, 333 is done and is completely online. 198 will be completed this summer and is set to be open for residents August 1st, and we'll be completing the academic spaces throughout the early fall. We are, and you may tentatively plan on, but we'll have notices about this, of having a ribbon cutting on October 6th this fall. And we're just working out the details of that, but we're hoping that October 6th, we will have one big party to celebrate the new building, the academic village, the new name, and all things that are UC Law San Francisco, and the great tradition that is Hastings College of the Law from our great historical roots in 1878. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding the buildings, regarding the curriculum, regarding the centers, regarding the clinics, regarding the research centers, regarding whatever questions you might have about all of our great programming. And I think, Eric, I don't know if you're back on and able to do it. We have a video that we can share with you that is kind of fun to watch, but we'll see if we can overcome our initial technical difficulties.
Yeah, thanks, David, and apologies to everyone. I was all set to introduce our esteemed Chancellor and Dean. So if I may, I'll skip, the intellectual elements, which speak for themselves, listening to you speak, although they're quite impressive. But I also always love sharing some fun facts about our Chancellor and Dean. So if I can just take a second to do this. I think most of you know, but David was born in Yonkers, New York, and I summered in the Bronx. So he and I bond over this when we're traveling together. As kind of an extension of his New York roots, David's an avid Mets fan and a huge Seinfeld fan, along with several other of us here in the office. So we're kind of quoting Seinfeld on almost a daily basis. David played ice hockey, a big Rangers fan who looked to have maybe a good playoff run in them. And then what I love most, and I'm still needing to sample one of these, but David's an accomplished chef, highlighted by his world famous meatballs. So David, I'm excited to try those one of these days. And then kind of moving on, David mentioned the academic village. And so out of my office, I am actually so fortunate, and it's not lost on me. I'm so excited every day to come into work because this is the new building here. It's all buttoned up and they're working on the inside. So looking great. And again, as was mentioned before, I had some technical difficulties. So I'm going to hold my breath and try to share my screen and show a video here. And apologies in advance if I freeze up again, but let's give it a shot. Okay, I think so far it seems to be going fairly well. And just yell at me or wave your hands if it's not.
It's working.
It's good.
There's no sound, but. So this is the entryway, two-story entryway. That's the Lex Lab that you see with the red background there. And this moves into the where the courtrooms are. And this is our brand new Jane and Marvin Baxter appellate courtroom. And that's a beautiful white Vermont marble on the backside there. And there's also a trial courtroom that's not shown in the video. This is the law journal space. So all the law journals have their own offices. This is the new auditorium, replacing the old LBM or Louis B. Mayer that you'll remember. It'll seat 400. This is a courtyard that is in the center of the building. If you look hard to the left, there's actually a skylight there. And here are the apartments. This is a one-bedroom apartment with a nice view of the Capitol, of City Hall. And I believe this is an efficiency. So this is the 7th floor social commons. It's just an area for students to hang out with a wraparound deck. And there you see it from the outside. And that blue in there will have an artwork on it. And here you have the drone footage from above the sky, above the 198 building.
Okay, thanks for narrating there, David.
Sure.
Appreciate that. Okay, so before we move on to our Q&A, one very important announcement today is UC Law SF Giving Day. It's part of our Spring Week engagement activities. So of course, Meredith and her team and the advancement team and really everyone aims to provide opportunities for our stakeholders to connect with the law school. We had the great game yesterday at Oracle Park, but certainly embedded in that, and the Chief Development Officer needs to say this, we want you to support the school financially. So we want to give you lots of opportunities to do that. And so during this week of connecting and celebrating, we invite you to make a donation to the school. Meredith is putting a link to the giving page in the chat box. So thank you for all of your support. I know many, if not all of you on the call here today already support the school. We appreciate that very much. So I will head it over to questions. So let's see. Does anybody want to raise a virtual hand? Les Nichols, that's not a virtual hand, but I see your hand, so
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Good to be with you all. I've got my 60th college reunion coming up this year too. So what I do is I get my 5-year pledge out of the way, then I don't have to sweat or worry about calls coming in. Charles Willen closed the deal on that for me several years ago. Hi, Charles, and Tracy Whitlock. It's all great. Great to see you. My question is really positive in tone, but it's a little critical too. My undergraduate school, Stanford, has just had the same thing that happened at Hastings with the invited guest being shouted down. Now, I don't want to retread that too much. I saw David's very good presentation. I've followed that. I'm just wondering, what's the aftermath? I know that the dean at Stanford, in a 10-page epistle that I thought could have been reduced to a couple paragraphs, like favor free speech and civility, nonetheless had to rebut charges of why did you apologize for allowing this forum, et cetera, et cetera. And it happens that one of my mentees at the Inns of Court, who wrote a published essay, turned out to be the invited guest or the inviter at the Federalist Law Society. Everybody says he's a great guy. He was very supportive of the university and the dean of equity, inclusion, so forth. But that was a bad adventure. I'm wondering, in the aftermath of that and the stated course that are going to be provided, is there any recognition or a kind of a consensus that there is a place for vigorous protest, and that should be encouraged? Where I came out of the 60s, vigorous protest era, civil rights and so forth, but that the forum, whether it be the courtroom or the invited forum for a guest speaker and debate, should be preserved. And any thoughts about that and how students are responding to your presentation in that regard, which did not invoke any discipline, nor are they doing it at Stanford, but nonetheless trying to set certain bright line rules. Thanks for listening to me.
Yeah, thanks, Wes, and it's great to see you. We, of course, did face that situation. We responded to it, I think, very forcefully, not unlike the way Jenny Martinez, the dean of Stanford, responded. Didn't quite get the attention that she got. I didn't write 10 pages, although that is often what I would be inclined to do. So it's nice to be a little bit more reticent than the dean of Stanford. I thought her memo actually was quite strong and very appropriate, and I think it got the correct amount of attention, and it probably deserves even more attention. If you read it through, you saw that she actually cited our policy that we developed after that. I give Grace Hum, our Dean of Students, a great deal of credit for doing the initial draft and working it through the administration and staff and students and faculty. And so Jenny Martinez, or Dean Martinez, actually cited our event policy that we came up with after the Ilya Shapiro event and when he was shouted down. That policy makes it very clear that you have a right to protest, that we will make a appropriate time, place, and manner judgments about where you do that. Certainly part of protesting is itself free speech, and we never have any intention to shut that down. But we also want to hear all voices. And so if a speaker is duly and appropriately invited to the campus, we will protect that speaker's ability to talk, and we intend to enforce that. The difficulty, just being candid about this, and Jenny Martinez at Stanford said it, and we said it, when you have a situation that you didn't fully anticipate, or at least we didn't fully anticipate, she may have had a little bit more notice, but even then didn't anticipate it quite the situation as it turned out. You know, you have 40 or 50 students that are acting in different ways. The due process that's required, as you all understand due process, to bring up every individual student on conduct code violations would be enormous. Now, that's not to say I would never do that, and we would certainly try to identify any problems if they came up in the future. But the fact of the matter is that the disruption that would have occurred at Stanford or would have occurred at UC Law to individually litigate every conduct code disorder that might have happened at that event would have been too much. And I'm just speaking candidly as an administrator. And a lot of them probably didn't fully appreciate the ramifications of the behavior. And so, you know, Morris Ratner, Grace Hum, and myself wrote that initial response, which was very strong and did not make all of our students happy. But that's the nature of speech. You know, as Justice Robert Jackson said, you know, free speech is not worth very much if we all agree with what's being
Yes.
said. And he said it more eloquently than I just did, but the fact of the matter is that free speech should be rough and tumble. Law school should be rough and tumble. The reality out there that you see it every day, whether it's the Tennessee legislature or the Manhattan DA's office, the realities of practicing law is that you can't be soft and approach it, with your eyes closed. You need to have your eyes open. You need to understand different points of view. And I've told our students the best thing they can do for their education is go to all the Federalist Society events if they don't agree with them, because at least, again, just speaking candidly, at least 6 out of the 9 justices on the Supreme Court are Federalist Society members. If you're arguing before whether it's a Superior Court judge in California or a federal judge or the U.S. Supreme Court, you're going to have people that don't necessarily share your perspective on the world. And you better understand every perspective if you're going to be an effective advocate. And that's what we're about, is training effective advocates. So I share your views, Les. I think protest is fine. I think you can make your views well known, but you can't make your views well known by shutting out alternative views that are legitimately presented.
Thank you, David.
Hey, David, someone's asking about 198, the Academe, and who all will be living in all of the many, many units that we're building over there.
So we expect that a large share will be UC Law students, our law students. We've gotten a lot of interest from prospective students, and we have a lot of interest from students that are now living in the tower. The tower will be emptied at this summer, and we're going to be renovating the tower. As you may have heard, we received a $90 million grant from the state of California to kickstart the renovation of the tower. The total cost, we're just now reviewing research or RFPs, proposals from architectural firms to do the architectural necessity of renovating the tower. The total cost we anticipate to be about $230 million to renovate the tower to bring it up to University of California seismic standards. So the primary reason for the renovation is seismic. It's of course a 1929 building. It's undergone 2 seismic retrofits over the years, but this will put it into the highest standards of the 21st century. And then we'll also be renovating every floor as well as the Great Hall. You all remember that the building was built in 1929 by the Methodists, and to the left of the tower is a cathedral, and the cathedral has been empty now for at least 50 years or so. We will actually begin spending the $90 million on renovation of that cathedral, what we call the Great Hall, which just provides a beautiful space and will turn out, I think, to be a real signature space for the school. And so the tower will be completely emptied out this summer of 2023, and we're hoping to have the renovation done by around 2025 at the latest, maybe even a little bit sooner than that, depending on a few circumstances. Whenever you break into a 1929 building, there can be surprises. So we obviously will have a time frame that will be a little bit more elastic than has been true with the 198 building. Other than that, for beyond our students, 1/3 of the students will be UCSF students, trainees, residents, interns, and then the rest will come from graduate programs at USF, San Francisco State, University of Pacific, Dental School, and Berkeley graduate programs. So there'll be quite an interesting mix of graduate students. We have no plans and have no intention of having undergraduates in that facility, mainly because undergraduates are underage. So where there might be an event on the 7th floor involving alcohol, it creates much more difficulty to have undergraduates in a housing project.
Okay, thanks, David. I'll give an opportunity for people to raise a hand or jump in. Peter, and then Destiny.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for convening this gathering. I think it's really important. It builds and strengthens the institution. Recently, we've seen a really disturbing trend. I'll just point the finger at our politicians collectively across the board. And that trend is to disregard essential elements of a society that runs on law and legal institutions, disregarding subpoenas, uh, uh, encouraging disrespect for court opinions after the appellate process has been exhausted, not accepting election results. What can we do to strengthen our legal institutions? I mean, I finally, have concluded that this is really dangerous, and it seems to be growing. I'm on the left progressive side. I recently heard a progressive politician come out and say, well, let's just disregard this opinion on abortion pills. We've had terrible decisions in our legal system. The Korematsu decision. We could go on. Let's think out loud on this. What should we do?
So it's a great question, Peter. So thank you for it. And it's something that we wrestle with in the classroom. We want to introduce our students to this issue because I think that if you don't face it squarely, it's never going to be resolved. It's never going to be truly confronted. I don't have a magic solution. I will tell you that when I teach constitutional law, one of the things I say to them, and when I was teaching, and I'm not teaching currently, prior, I really think the last decade, a decade and a half, it's become more of an issue. I say to my students, the Constitution is a document. When you start and you look at the preamble that says "We the people," we're the people. We're the people. If you don't abide by the rule of law, if you don't abide by those words on that document, the document is worthless. And when you look at the underlying principles of Madison's call for checks and balances, and that when he talks about if men were angels, you wouldn't need a government, and if government were stacked with angels, you wouldn't need any kind of regulations or controls on government. I think it's Federalist Paper 51, if my recollection serves me. Those checks and balances are only meaningful to the extent that whether it's the House of Representatives or the Senate or a legislature or others stand up and try to check excesses of power. And we're all responsible for that. And so what we do, I hope what we do as a law school, and again, the big tent concept, that I don't think, and I do it on the first day of orientation, I make this point. I say, look, you are not serving your own education if you don't learn every perspective. I mean, you can go work for the Sierra Club, but you better understand the climate change perspectives of Chevron and Exxon, because you're going to have to respond to them. You need to have an open mind to what ideas are out there in terms of how you frame your response and how you frame your strategy. And so, in the end, it's up to us to preserve the constitutional democracy. And I agree. I mean, I think when you look at it historically, the Supreme Court has done incredible things and has done things that we, regret as a profession, whether it's Judge Scott, Korematsu, Plessy versus Ferguson. The list can go on, and depending on your political perspective, you'll have your own litany of bad decisions. And again, that's the world that we live in, and we have to stand up and take a stand, be principled about where we think society should go. And again, if you don't agree with the judge's decision in Texas about the abortion pill, well, what happened? We saw it happened last night.
Yeah.
The Fifth Circuit upheld parts of it and reversed parts of it, and now it's been appealed up to the U.S. Supreme Court. That's the way the system's supposed to work.
Yeah.
And in the end, the way the system's supposed to work is to give us the opportunity to abide by it, but also to, Les's point earlier, it's okay to protest too. It's okay to disagree. I just read a editorial in the New York Times today. There's a new book out that I'm actually looking forward to reading. But it's from the left progressive side, and I consider myself at least on the liberal side of the world. And I think it's called Nine Black Robes. And it's basically a discussion of the Supreme Court and whether the Supreme Court is overly political or not overly political, and what is the role of stare decisis and precedent in Supreme Court decision making. Again, we're all trying to do, I think, good for how we define a good society. And I'll just sort of end with, to this point, Peter, because it's such an important issue. In the end, the law is about social engineering. I tell my students every regulation, every law, every decision has some understanding of what society is either supposed to look like, or statutory interpretation, what the legislature thought they were doing in terms of creating a societal reality. And so when you are protecting against discrimination because of sex, which is part of Title VII, Title IX. What does that mean? Because of sex, does it include same-sex couples? Does it include all LGBTQ plus individuals? And that, but the statute was passed, whether it's Title VII or Title IX, it was passed with an intention to socially engineer the world, and the courts are part of that business. And because we're part of the courts and we're part of the legislature and we're part of the policy world, that's part of our business too, is to understand what rules and regulations are doing in creating however you define it, the good society, the society that we want to preserve.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's a great response. I think focusing on multiple perspectives is a solid way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it.
Okay, Destiny, you've got your hand up.
Hi, yes, thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
thank you. And thank you for a wonderful presentation. My questions are in regards to the LEOP program. And before I get into my questions, I'd just like to preface it with the fact that, as a former LEOP student, I graduated in 2016. There was this notion that LEOP students don't measure up, which is wholly untrue. I had the opportunity to extern for the Chief Justice of the U.S. Northern District, as well as walk into a job as a trial attorney prior to me graduating from law school. And so was a number of my colleagues in the LEOP program. My question is, what is the school administration doing to support LEOP students in the LEOP program? And the second is, what is the administration doing to ensure that students still have the opportunity to be admitted to the school through the LEOP program? Thank you.
So thank you, Destiny. And it's a great question. We are incredibly proud of the LEOP program. The LEOP program, as you know, is over 50 years old. And so when I came to then Hastings, now UC Law, back in 1987, I didn't know anything about the LEOP program, but it was there as part of the established DNA of our institution. And I have embraced it over the years, because I think that, to your point, I think all of our students, prospective students and graduates bring different skill sets. But one of the skill sets that is part of what a LEOP student is the fact that they've overcome disadvantage. And I really welcome the opportunity. Jenny Kwan and I always, my chief of staff is on the call, we always go to the LEOP orientation to welcome the LEOP students to the campus. And one of the things I say to them year after year is, they are actually advantaged, not disadvantaged, because they are they're going to be in the business of advocating for people who have a problem. That's why you go to see a lawyer most of the time, because you have either have a problem that you need solved, or you have a problem that you're trying to avoid, or it's a transactional activity. But if you've overcome that disadvantage, you know what that world looks like. You're able to identify, and one of the great skills of any lawyer, and I love the word counselor at law, because so much of being a lawyer, and you all know this better than I do, so much of being a lawyer is being a counselor, is talking with your clients about not only what they want to accomplish and what they can accomplish, but how they're going to accomplish it. And sometimes litigation is the right way to go, and sometimes simply talking it out and getting some sort of mediation is the right way to go. But you're coming from a place where you don't, to use an old expression, you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth. You've had to overcome that disadvantage, and that's going to give you a true advantage. So I agree with you 100% that we have students are every bit as talented and every bit as capable as any of our students and any of our graduates. What we're doing, we continue to do what we've always done. We have a target of 20% of our class to be re-up students. June Sakamoto and Brian Zerby, the director of admissions. June Sakamoto is the dean of enrollment management. They are actively seeking out students to be part of the re-up program. Elizabeth McGriff, who's the current director of re-up, is phenomenal. She helps guide the students from day one. They get an extra week of orientation at the beginning of their time on campus, and they get a great deal of assistance and academic support throughout. And of course, we have academic support for all of our students as well. But the re-up group, I think, bonds and has the opportunity to really develop a sense of community that I think is a great advantage to them. And then we have scholarships that are directed. We have great benefactors and donors who believe in re-up and have been very generous, whether it's a scholarship for tuition or it's a bar scholarship. So to make sure that our students are able to afford bar review classes, we have some scholarships that are directed specifically at re-up graduates because that's what the donors wanted. And of course, when donors have a particular goal in mind, whether it's to support students for tuition or to support students on the bar, we are extremely encouraging of that kind of support. So we've had, I think really great success, and actually great success on the bar over the last several years with our re-up graduates. So I'm with you, and I think that re-up is, I wish I could be around for the next 50 years of re-up, but re-up is going to be a very strong ongoing program, certainly throughout my administration, but it's something that we're really proud of here.
Thank you, Destiny, and thank you, Dean Faigman. Does anybody else want to ask a question? Rick. Hey, Rick, how you doing?
Hey, Rick.
You got to unmute.
There we go. I was just curious. I saw in the paper that the new building had a flooding problem, and I was concerned. Have we found out what the cause of it is? We may get some more rain, and I'd hate to have what seemingly happened happen. So, can you give us some background or what happened and
Sure.
what the end result is?
So the new building, meaning because we have a lot of new buildings, the 333 Kachet Law Center had a flooding problem. It probably was not the rain. So what happened just generally was that we ended up, I got a call very early in the morning that there was about 6 inches of water in the bottom floor, the lower level of the Kachet Law Center. We think what happened was that the building itself has, I believe, platinum LEED certification. And so part of that is that we use gray water for the toilets. And so it's recirculated water. So water that's coming in from the rain, we got a lot of rain this year, would fill up that tank. However, when that tank is not full, we get water from the city. And so we believe, and we have the engineers sort of, they haven't given us the final opinion, but right now what we think happened was that that was full because of the rain, and that the pump that brought it in from the city didn't turn off when it was full. So that it was a gray water tank. It wasn't any sewage, but it was the water that supplies it, not the sewage part of it, that overflowed, and it overflowed into the floors, and it overflowed into the elevator bank. Luckily, the elevators were not in the lower levels, so the elevators were not at all affected. And we actually had Bill Group, who's building our new building, take the contract to fix it. It's going to be done on Monday. So they did a very quick job of it. It was just the lower level that was affected, and they've replaced all the flooring that was affected, all the carpeting that was affected, and we're going to be fully back online on Monday. Our insurance covers it. We have $100,000 deductible, again, just to be transparent. So our exposure is no more than 100,000. It's going to be around 700,000 or 800,000 total costs. Our insurance will pick up the difference. They've been out here. They're working with us in a very positive way. Once we find out what happened, of course, our insurance company will be interested in being reimbursed if the city or somebody else is responsible for it. And we would be interested in being reimbursed for that 100,000, of course, as well.
Okay.
So it was an issue for a few days. The classes there are several classrooms down there. They immediately no class hours were missed. They went on Zoom. So one of the benefits, I suppose, of COVID was we know how to go virtual very quickly. And then after one day, we were able to reassign those classes to other classrooms. So they were back in person after the first day.
It must be very frustrating when that happens. I just saw what had happened. I didn't know what the end result was, and whether or not the building was back in use again. And
yeah, it
really
was
felt
back in use
for you guys.
Yeah, actually, it's fully back in use except for the lower level 2 days later. So it was not a problem. The elevators were working again as well. Rick, you may have heard me say I love the job. It's never never boring, but it's a little bit like playing dodgeball. And but it's 360-degree dodgeball, so people are throwing the ball from every different direction. And you're right. It's a little frustrating when you get a call at 6 a.m. from your chief operating officer. I'd like to not answer the phone when my chief operating officer calls me at 6 a.m., but I know that it's actually a call that I should pick up. And so those are always the calls that I hit myself in the head on.
Part of the job. I don't
job.
know if dodgeball would be the correct analogy anymore. I think of more of whack-a-mole, and it's
Fair
just
enough.
your turn.
Yeah. Except, Rick, that puts me as the mole in that.
Well, you're the target.
But I'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
No, thank you for that. I was concerned about it. I hadn't heard what the end result was. Just like your explanation of the new housing and the new building. Am I correct that all of the people who were living in the tower, if they wanted to continue living on Hastings property, would have space in the tower next year?
Well, they'll all have space in the 198 building.
I'm sorry, it's space in the 198 place.
Oh yeah. We're hoping to fill it up, but right now there's availability. As long as we just started. Actually, I think we're starting today. The leases that we actually call them licenses, but we're starting the leases, and so there are 656 units to choose from. So they'll have that option. We've been sending notices to them specially, so they've gotten independent notice of availability. So as long as they act in a timely fashion, there'll be apartments available for them.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, sir.
Okay, we still have a few minutes left. Are there any other questions? Jerome Pandel, good to see you again.
Hey, Jerome.
everyone. I was very sad that as soon as I left the game last night, the Giants lost their lead. So that was bad luck for all the Giants fans. Although I know we have a lot of Dodger fans in our
We won't blame you. We won't blame you. for that, Jerome.
I was curious. So seeing all these new buildings come online is really exciting. But obviously the most important thing is that we have faculty and students to fill them. I've heard some of the plans to expand our allying with other schools, but do you view the kind of next phase of a, whether you call it a campaign formally or not, but of a focus of fundraising on increasing both scholarship and faculty retention and hiring opportunities?
Yes, I think that, as you all know, I think now we're in the quiet phase of a comprehensive campaign, and that, the way I see our institution is that we are as good as any law school in the country, but a lot of law schools have more in the way of resources. First of all, many law schools have central campuses that they draw upon, and so that benefits them in ways that don't benefit us. And so part of the idea of the academic village is to broaden our base to some extent that makes it more like a university than just a standalone law school. And so I think it'll, just like you would diversify your portfolio, we're diversifying our campus. So I think that will help just inherently and make it more interesting. So I think that itself could attract students and faculty. But absolutely, in terms of what I hope people will see as priorities, or what I see as priorities as well, which is, first of all, student scholarships. I think that attracting great students turn into great lawyers. And so if we can bring in a very talented, experienced group, that's going to benefit them and benefit us and benefit the profession. And then I think faculty are extremely important. And, quite frankly, and you've heard me, I'm sure, Jerome, you've heard me say this before, and growing up in New York, NYU is my model. Back in the 1970s, when I was growing up in New York, Lower Fifth Avenue, Washington Square Park was not really someplace that at least my father would not have wanted me to just hang out. And NYU in the late 70s and throughout the 1980s took advantage of their real estate and really started building housing and attracted faculty. And one of the great factoids that I look at, there have been a dozen faculty members that have moved between Columbia and NYU. All 12 of them have moved from Columbia to NYU. NYU has not lost any faculty to Columbia. When I was applying to law school in the 80s, Columbia was viewed as a much better law school than NYU. Today, it's kind of a toss-up. Just depends whether you want to be on the Upper West Side or you want to be down, lower Manhattan. And that model, I think, is how we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And I think we're already a great institution. We have this great history, but if we can build an endowment, and we can build an endowment that attracts great students and attracts great faculty, we're going to really put ourselves on not only the national map, but the international map. And so I hope that the comprehensive campaign does take on that focus. I will say that when we have, I have Dean's discretionary money, a large portion of that Dean's discretionary money gets put into retention scholarships to make sure that students don't leave that are at the top of our class, but also attracting students with great backgrounds, whether it's LEOP students, students with work experience and other backgrounds that really will redound to the benefit of the community, but also lead to them being even better attorneys. But thanks for the question, Jerome. It's a great question. Phil?
Hi, Dean Faigman. Good afternoon. Thanks for your time today. Wondering if there's any status, if you can speak about the lawsuit over the naming of the school.
Sure, I can talk to you a little bit about it. It's all public information. We, as many of you know, we were sued October 4th, 2022. The governor had signed the legislation about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks before that. We filed a anti-SLAPP motion against the plaintiffs. and they filed a motion for preliminary injunction to stop the bill from going into effect, which was destined to go into effect January 1st, 2023. Those two hearings were held in the last week of December. The judge denied our anti-SLAPP, and the judge denied the plaintiff's motion for preliminary injunction. Ultimately, the plaintiffs decided not to appeal the denial of the preliminary injunction, and we did appeal the motion, the anti-SLAPP motion. That's now before the intermediate appellate court, and I believe the briefing is all done at this point, and we're just waiting for the next steps at the intermediate appellate court. But depending on how it works out with the anti-SLAPP, it'll either end there or it would go to trial. We're of course parties to that. The state of California is also party, obviously, to this litigation, and they're not part of the anti-SLAPP motion because they're not an individual, so they don't benefit from that. So the trial right now is stayed, but there may be a trial subsequently. We'll sort of see where things go, but it's really in the hands of the intermediate appellate court.
Thanks, David. And thanks for the question, Phil. Good to see you. And we had one more question, but the hand has been. Yeah, you want to ask your question? Is it Mukund?
Yeah, hey, how's it going? Sorry about that. Yeah, I was wondering if Dean Faigman, if you have any comments on integrating the recent developments in AI and technology into the first year legal curriculum. I'm just wondering, I mean, this is, it's sort of off topic, but I'm just curious what you think about that.
No, I think it's a great question, and I think it's right on topic. We're having a mini faculty retreat on generative AI to talk about how to manage it, because obviously it presents, difficulty. As I'm thinking about this, and it's, I don't have all the answers by any means, and I'm really interested. Actually, there's a dean's group that all the ABA accredited deans meet every couple of months, and generative AI is our topic for June. So it's something that all the law schools are interested in managing. So I think that is something that we have to learn to live with. When I was in law school, and many of you were in law school, I had to learn to shepherdize using real books and real paper.
Oh, yeah.
And then Westlaw and Lexis came along, and you now Keysight, and you don't need to shepherdize anymore. And I think that future generations will respond to generative AI in the same way. It'll produce early drafts, and it will produce early contracts or whatever it's doing. It's going to do a lot. How we integrate it into the first year. If I had my druthers, I would like to think about, and the bar exam has limited us to some extent because it's so doctrinally focused that you have to learn property torts, contracts, and you have to know all that material. And again, I did all that, and I'm glad I have that background knowledge. But every time I deal with lawyers, and I've had more than my opportunity, more than my appropriate opportunity to deal with lawyers since being dean. I never, they're always working together and working with us together. It's teamwork. And most of you probably understand, your experience with lawyers is very collaborative. And even when I was clerking for the judge brought all the clerks in, and every question was debated and discussed around a table. And business school operates that way. Business school is very collaborative. You have teams coming together. And so, although I think that there's a lot to learn in the law, I'd like to see more collaboration and more team learning in law school.
Interesting.
And so part of my suggested solution as we go forward, and we're going to, I think, experiment with different modalities, would be to continue to learn what you have to learn to have basic background in law and legal principles, but to also learn to be more interactive, to use generative AI in a group that may generate the first draft. But then what the skills that we're teaching may be skills that are on top of whatever that foundation looks like. And that foundation, what it looks like in 2023, is going to be quite different than what it's going to look like in 2030. And it's just going to keep building but we need to basically stay on top of it. So I kind of agree that at some point it's going to end up in the first year curriculum. How we do that and how we integrate it, I'd welcome, you're with Align Technology. I welcome anybody's input, because I think that it's just going to take a lot of creativity and a lot of ingenuity to figure out what the world is going to look like going forward with, not only generative AI, but the Zoom technologies and everything else that we're dealing with is just going to change the way we practice.
And if I may add, I think at some point we may have to shift away from study of appellate court opinions as the primary teaching modality, right? Or at least integrate other inputs, something like that.
But some of the challenges, I was talking to somebody just yesterday about, I have a treatise that's on Westlaw, and my son-in-law is actually an engineer. He works for a company. He's works for Planet Labs, that they shoot up satellites to take pictures of the Earth. And he said the big problem with generative AI now is access to materials. And so I said, well, how am I going to get paid my royalties? When a lawyer goes on Westlaw and spends an hour with my treatise, I get, a few cents on the dollar for that time. Well, generative AI will spend about half a second going through one of my chapters and then work that into it, even has access to that. And so there's an entire intellectual property domain, both in terms of how these smart machines are going to get access to all that material. Because right now it's their access to public materials, much less access to litigation materials. And then you have all of, Westlaw and West Academics libraries of materials that are proprietary, that authors, need to be versed on. And how that all is going to work, I think, is one of the next great steps for where, if generative AI can actually get access to all of, Wright, Miller, and Keynes' federal practice and procedure, and Faigman's, modern scientific evidence, and all the other materials, you're now talking about a quantum leap of capability in AI. So it's all. I think it's exciting. Somebody said to me, it's a good time to be at the end of your career in the law. I said, no, it's a great time to be at the beginning of your career in the law. I mean, the opportunities here, to be creative and ingenious on how you deal with this. We're living in a new world. That's what you want to experience as a newly printed lawyer. So I think it's all exciting.
Great question. That's a wonderful note to end on. I want to thank Chancellor and Dean David Faigman, as always, for being so generous with your time and answering all the questions posed your way. And to Meredith Jaggard, our fearless leader of our alumni engagement team, and her team for putting this all together, and all of the week's events, and all of you for joining us. It's great to see you all here virtually, and I hope to see many of you later this week at some of our in-person events, and if not then certainly sometime shortly thereafter. Thanks for all of your support. It is an exciting time to be affiliated and part of this great institution, UC Law San Francisco. Have a wonderful day, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Dean.
Thanks.